18th day of August 2020 is appointed as nomination day. The date fixed for the taking of the polls, that is the general elections for the year 2020, is therefore Thursday, September the 3rd, 2020.
That's the Prime Minister Andrew Michael Holness announcing the 18th general election in Jamaica since universal adult suffrage in 1944. But an election in a pandemic. Hi, I'm Damion Mitchell, and thank you for joining us for this special Jamaica Votes series. With me is Darren Luton. He is a senior Gleaner reporter and the coordinator of our Jamaica Elections 2020. We also have on Zoom political scientist at the New Jersey City University, Dr. Jermaine McAlpin, and senior journalist with the RJR Gleaner Communications Group, Earl Moxham. Well, first up, let's start with you, Darren. An election in a pandemic. What do you make of the timing of the announcement of this election by Prime Minister Andrew Holness?
Well, Prime Minister Holness has gone to the polls. He's going quickly. He's not going to wait and see what's happening going into the pandemic to see if the numbers are increasing as it relates to the cases. It doesn't make a lot of sense to wait and see what's happening. We're also looking at things having to do with the hurricane season. You don't know what's happening there, the job losses. The economy may not turn around as fast as he would like going in. So it will get tougher for him going forward. It's a good time for him to get the votes out before the school system reopens on September 7th. And the announcement today comes just after a package of some sort that would want to give stimulus to not only parents, but maybe in some way to voters to go out and support the Jamaica Labour Party.
Dr. McAlpin, I'm sure you would have been watching the announcement by the Prime Minister in the Parliament. What did you make of the timing?
There is no good time to call an election in a pandemic, but there is a bad time. And I think the Prime Minister attempted to do the former rather than the latter. I'm sure he was watching almost like a bellwether demonstration effect what happened in Trinidad last night, though it may not have yet been completed given 5 marginal seats now under potential recount. But I think the reality of it is that all those who have been clamoring for a fixed election date, well, here comes the true test case, because if we had a fixed election date, pandemic or no pandemic, excepting under extenuating circumstances, the elections would have been held. We see what is happening in the North, in the United States, with the same kind of argument being made that, in light of what is going on, the elections may need to be extended in terms of when, but that's unlikely to happen. So I think he was hedging his bet. Like Darren said, it was better to err on the side of having it before this school term, and certainly before we get into the part of the hurricane season where we've had maybe some of our most devastating hurricanes, that is September through to October. Interestingly, I wondered why they didn't, before the government, as in both JLP and PNP, not decide to continue with remote learning, but we'll have that conversation at some other time.
Yes. Earl, was there a choice for the Prime Minister, or was it best for him to make this announcement in the Parliament?
In terms of the venue for the announcement, I have no difficulty with it being done in Parliament, in the sense that it was not done in a way that would detract from the dignity of Parliament. That is something that one has to be careful about. And I think that it was okay. There was a little bit of rowdiness towards the very end, but not during the Prime Minister's presentation. And so in that context, I think it went well enough. I think he's still taking a risk in terms of the hurricane season. Ironically, he has scheduled this election for the same date as the rescheduled 2007 election, when Prime Minister Portia Simpson-Miller, she was then, had called the election for August 27th. Then there came a storm, blew it off course, and they were ultimately able to reschedule it for September 3. We had Hurricane Gilbert on, was it September 10, 1988?
12.
September 12, 1988.
Yes. Right, September 12. And therefore, there is that history, and we have to bear that in mind. I think they have to think in terms of the contingencies and therefore look to the weather forecasts. I don't think that this is yet a done deal in terms of the vagaries of the weather.
Well, let me take you on in respect of that, but I'm going to throw the question to Darren first before I come back to you. Do you see this as being a close election or a potentially close election, Darren?
Elections are very funny events, you know. You can't necessarily predict them unless you're on the ground knowing what's happening in every single PD. So I take you back to 2011. The polls, they were showing too close to call in some instances. It was supposed to be a close election. The PNP won 2-1. What happened in those cases, in that election, was that there were quite a few seats that went to the PNP, but the margins, they weren't great. Now, what I was looking at the numbers that I'm seeing were about 10 seats. They were won by a margin of 500 or less in the last general elections. So it's still anybody's game. The PNP can win the election if they plot a route to victory, which involves holding on to the 29 seats and just getting 3. That sounds to be an easy equation. But it is holding on to so many seats that you are defending, and you can point to about 7 of those. So it may be on the day a difficult election for the opposition, but it's not necessary, but it's one that it is not insurmountable.
Am I seeing the PNP, though, saying they're expecting 33-30?
I think they are targeting in the region of 35. Let's recall last election, what happened is that the JLP picked up 11 seats. They weren't expected, if you follow the polls, to come close and win. But they went through and they picked up 11. The PNP will need a day like that, and they would have to depend, maybe, in my mind, on a lower voter turnout. Lower voter turnout traditionally favors the incumbent. But in this case, the PNP has talked about having a lot of ground game, and if it's hardcore support versus hardcore support, then maybe they have a good day. But they will have to defend quite a few seats that they have with margins under 500 that the JLP has been targeting.
But let us not forget, and Earl, I'll bring you in right here. Let us not forget, though, that the last general election did not favor the incumbent, and it was, in fact, the election with the lowest voter turnout that we'd have seen. So it brings to the question, Earl Moxham, is this going to be an issues-based general election?
I'm not sure how much of an issues-based election it's going to be. I think that that ground game is going to be very important. Yes, there will be some particular and peculiar issues that some voters will be paying attention to. But if the two parties are as close as they might be in terms of level of support in certain constituencies, then it is, as Darren says, particularly important to have your ground game on. I find it very interesting that the People's National Party does not seem particularly intent on going after the constituency that I am from in terms of birth, not where I'm living at the moment.
That's Southwest St. Elizabeth, is that?
Yes. That is St. Elizabeth Southwest.
The bellwether.
That has been the definitive bellwether constituency. It has always gone to the winning party nationally since it was cut.
59.
What they seem to be doing is to focus their attention on Southeast St. Elizabeth, in which the incumbent is Mr. Witter. The PNP has the brother of Kern Spencer as its candidate there. And it seems that they are pinning their hopes on picking up that particular seat in St. Elizabeth rather than looking towards history and the importance of a bellwether constituency such as Southwest St. Elizabeth. So it seems that they are perhaps conserving their resources and trying to do what Darren is saying in terms of just looking at those seats that they could possibly, some might say, spring a surprise in, but not go for a sort of wide margin of victory, which not many people think the PNP has a chance of winning by a wide margin anyway.
Yes, Dr. McAlpin, in a situation as this, the Airwar is going to be very important. The PNP has been lagging in respect of the Airwar, getting its message together and getting it out to the people. What's your take in respect of the significance of the Airwar in this 2020 general election campaign?
it is going to be significant, but I think beyond just the question of Airwar, it's the packaging, right? I think much of what the PNP has struggled with is packaging a coherent and brass tax kind of message. You have your core constituents, but the reality of it is that if you're going to move from the incumbent party having 34 seats, it means that you will have to wrestle some seats from them. And so if we were to start with the presumption that each party keeps the amount of seats that they currently have, starting at that base, it is incumbent on the PNP to wrestle some of those. The messaging is important, and thus far, I'm not seeing a centralized, organized, coherent, unified message beyond using a message that I doubt will resonate with people, especially when the messenger, is the PNP, and that is the question of corruption. This kind of leitmotif, I don't think will sell. If we follow the Don Anderson polls, it is very clear when 47% of Jamaicans indicated that that is not going to be the basis on which they vote. So I think the messaging, what is your central message beyond pointing to the corruption of the other party? What is your core value? What will you bring? I think someone said it best. We think of the manifestos, and I'm not waiting for the manifestos with any great anticipation, because they are like, Santa Claus lists. A lot of them is just nice wishful thinking. It sounds great, but I don't know that they are programmatic. So I think the PNP will have to focus on what is our core message and how do we remove some of the advances and some of the advantages that an incumbent generally has. You have to wrestle some seats from the JLP in order to win. There's no other path to victory unless you wrestle those seats.
Yes. So, Darren, how much weight, though, are you putting on this 89,000 new voters who would have been added to the list compared with the last general election?
Well, it depends on where. We have to disaggregate the data to see where they are coming from, which seats these people are in, if they are in the battleground seats, as it may. You talk about, for example, South St. James, that the JLP is going after the PNP. Derek Kelly, I won it by about 62 votes, my memory tells me. If it is the case that a lot of those persons have been put on the list by the JLP, and if they can get out those voters, so putting them on the list and getting them out to vote is important. Now, you have to look at the data over time. I looked at 2006 data. In the last year, 2005 enumeration, 55% of those persons who were put on the list turned out to vote. Now, that's above the national average in that year alone. So the 2000, as I said, the 2015 voters, 55% of them turned out to vote. If the parties have been strategic in terms of the constituencies that they are focusing, in terms of getting those people on the list and getting them to the polling station, that's a plus for them. But remember, you're facing an issue now called COVID. How many of these young voters who may have gone to the enumeration centers by themselves, how many of these people are prepared to stand in line, maybe 6 feet apart, and wait their turn to vote? It may become tricky in the time of COVID, yes?
We're almost running out of time, but have to take this one from you, Earl. What now, as the election campaign is expected to kick off?
Well, one would expect that there would be, they're going to be treading a very, or they're going to be walking a very thin line between observing the protocols in respect of the pandemic and at the same time getting their message across and influencing those whom they need to influence. I don't think they've been off to an auspicious start where that is concerned, because to have motorcades at this time, you are not going to be able to control your supporters. Even if you confine yourselves to your vehicles, even if you are wearing masks, you are not going to be able to control the movement and enthusiasm of those supporters, and you'll be sending the wrong signal, and you will be displaying wrong and bad leadership if you do not take the lead in enforcing or reinforcing the message. We still have a pandemic that we're dealing with, and there is a strike going on right now. Let me just very quickly comment on the challenge facing the two parties. I think traditionally it is seen that the PNP has an advantage in a negative sense, some might say, in terms of the number of quote-unquote garrison constituencies that the PNP has. If it starts from that base, then perhaps it needs to be competitive in fewer of the other seats than the JLP needs to be competitive in. But the landscape is changing. Nobody can take anything for granted, as we saw in 2016.
Yes. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Certainly we'll be dissecting these and other issues over the next 3 weeks as we head down to the September 3 general election announced today by Prime Minister Andrew Holness. Thanks to Darrell Luton, senior reporter here at the Gleaner, and the coordinator for this, our Jamaica Votes 2020 series, Dr. Jermaine McAlpin, political scientist at the New Jersey City University, and senior journalist at the RJR Gleaner Communications Group, Earl Moxham. I'm Damion Mitchell. Thanks for watching.